The following program is a production of Ozarks Public Television.
Before the end of World War II, Americans across the country listened to radio for news, information, and entertainment. Moving images and features were a novelty, typically enjoyed in opulent movie theaters as Hollywood films and newsreels. This began to change dramatically and irrevocably in 1927 with the debut of electronic television, later moving into the American living room. In the 1940s, mass production of TV sets began allowing widespread sales beginning in 1946. More than an upstart and a brash challenge to theater owners and filmmakers, television's impact was increasingly evident following World War II. Even with limited broadcast schedules, expensive price tags, and in some parts of the country, limited accessibility.
Theaters closed in droves. People who went to the movies 2 or 3 times a week during the war years to get newsreels as well as be entertained. And of course, during the Depression, people went to the theater all the time, even though it was still somewhat expensive.
Television comes along a little bit later, changes the industry completely, changes that industry upside down, allows people to get news, information, entertainment that they want to within their homes, changes the organization of a family life.
When TV came along, literally in a decade, it changed American culture.
At the end of World War II, you had about 1 million television sets. By the start of the 60s, that was about 55 million. So within a relatively short time frame, 10, 15 years, you saw basically an explosion.
This boom in television sales was not only indicative of the popularity and future of television, it was also remarkable in view of the price of television sets and the American economy at the time. Popular retailer Sears, Roebuck & Company offered TV sets in their catalog for the first time in 1949.
These were not something that you just go off and you just buy. Households would have to save for these because households would only earn $2,500, $3,000, maybe $3,500 on average in a typical year. So you're looking at an expense that's a third, fourth, maybe a fifth of the household income.
If you go to the Springfield newspapers of 1952, 1953, you will find ad after ad after ad for televisions, where you could go not only to buy a television, but to watch one. Imagine lots of rural people and lots of people from Springfield had never seen a functioning television set that had anything on it except the Indian. We're talking about the test pattern.
And that kind of gives you a sense of how much people actually value this. I mean, the amount of what economists would call utility that they get from this, the amount of happiness and satisfaction it gives to them was well worth the cost.
People would go to Barnes General Store 8 miles west on Highway 66, to Hers, to B.F. Goodrich, to Western Auto, to all these different places like Sedgwick's, Biederman's. They'd go to those places and they'd stand outside the door of the building itself and watch through the display area all these televisions. For the first time, they saw live television.
Clearly, America was enamored and mesmerized by this new technology, a technology that immediately delivered information and entertainment like its radio predecessor, but now with the moving images popularized by motion pictures, and unlike motion pictures, in the convenience of your home, and through a technology that lastingly changed America's information and entertainment landscape, and American home life forever.
Now people would come home, they'd sit, eat dinner in front of the television. Before that, people ate at the dinner table and talked.
In the early days of television, as today, individual national networks would provide content and corporate identity. But local stations developed and expanded these identities within communities with their own well-focused station image and their commitment to uniquely local programming. Springfield, Missouri not only reflected these industry trends, but in many ways strongly and indelibly contributed to local and, in some instances, national broadcast history. Springfield, Missouri in the 1950s was in many ways representative of other like-sized post-war cities of the era. The community was growing, and there was increased interest and effort in bringing new industry and new opportunities to town.
The early 50s was one of the most effervescent eras in Springfield history. New businesses were popping up on every corner. The city was anticipating a huge amount of growth. Heavy industry was coming to the city. Lilly Tulip Cup, Kraft made a huge expansion. Dayton Rubber built a plant here. Roy McBee Typewriter built a plant here. The city was really just on the cusp of the growth that has continued to today.
I was born in 1947, so I was 5 years old when I first saw television that I can remember, and it was not local television. I would go with my folks, my parents, on Saturday nights. We'd go to visit somebody. We might go to Roy and Irma Young's. They were neighbors of ours, and they had a TV before we did, and before Springfield had television. So we're watching Tulsa, Kansas City, Little Rock. I don't know what I was watching. I'm 5 or 6 years old, but we would watch it. Of course, one of the things I most definitely remember is the Indian, the test pattern. Sitting around, in some cases, what seemed like hours, waiting for the Indian to turn into live TV.
While Springfield was growing during the early 50s, and as more people were experiencing and enjoying this new broadcast medium of television, local media interest and presence was notably growing as well.
Then Columbia, at the university, they started talking about a television station. And Springfield Civic Pride, they wouldn't let, somebody as small as Columbia get ahead of them in this race for television. So in the 1952, a lot of plans were made, licenses were applied for. This was just at the very beginning of what would become the television that we know of today.
1953 was the year television broadcast originated in Springfield, with locally owned network affiliates KTTS-TV and KYTV-TV coming on the air within months of each other. CBS affiliate KTTS-TV Channel 10 signing on March 14th, with NBC affiliate KYTV Channel 3 following closely on October 1st.
It was a real bone shaker because they were used to radio, of course, but all of a sudden there was this other medium that was in their living room.
At the time, Harry Cooper Supply Company was one of the city's oldest and most successful businesses, being established in 1899. Family member Jack Cooper later became interested and active in local radio.
Well, if we go back a little before the Second World War, about 1938, in those years my father was interested in the family business, but he was also very much interested in the community.
At the time KTTS radio came on the air, there were 2 radio stations in town, KWTO and KGBX. KTTS radio came on the air in 1942. At that time, there was a group of citizens who believed that Springfield needed another source of news. And that group was headed by J.H.G. Cooper, Jack Cooper, of the Harry Cooper Supply Company.
He had a very good friend, a gentleman named G. Pearson Ward, who had been in the radio business, and I think that my father had just decided maybe that would be a voice in the community, so he got together with Mr. Ward, who knew about the business, knew how to run it, and they started KTTS Radio.
The initial reason for KTTS Radio was to have another source of news, hence the Independent Broadcasting Company. Pearson told me that in the beginning, they really didn't care whether they made any money or not. Now, they didn't want to lose money, but they really didn't care whether they made money because they simply wanted another source of news.
Probably, if there's a grandfather of Springfield media, it would be Pearson Ward, because he was on radio in the 1920s, creating radio stations of his own with crystal sets from the mid-1920s on.
He had an amateur radio operation at the age of 16 or so, doing code. Got interested in radio, got a job with Hers department store as a manager of their radio department, and strung an antenna from the Hers tower across to the flagpole of the Landers building. It was about a 50-foot stretch across there with a 50-foot vertical drop antenna between the 2 buildings, and started the first radio station in Springfield, Missouri. Its purpose was to demonstrate radio. so that they would have something for potential customers to listen to when they came down to buy a radio set.
He was a perfect fit with the Harry Cooper Supply Company, Jack Cooper, when they decided in 1941, when the Coopers decided to start the radio station. Now, by the time you go from 1941 with KTTS Radio to 1953, you got a dozen years for Pearson Ward to develop lots and lots of relationships with a lot of people on CBS. And so it's interesting that when Channel 10 came on the air in 1953, for the first 20 years, all of those years were Pearson Ward years.
The beginnings of NBC affiliate KYTV Television was in some ways similar, a partnership between successful local businessmen with ties to established local radio stations, and in this instance to the local newspaper as well. Well-known civic leader and businessman Lester E. Cox was instrumental in Springfield's first commercial radio station, KGBX, relocating to town from St. Joseph, Missouri in 1932 through a partnership with station owners Ralph D. Foster and C. Arthur Johnson. Later, the three expanded their local radio ownership to include KWTO. The government, through the Federal Communications Commission, began making rulings about competition and ownership, and ultimately Springfield's local newspaper organization received ownership of the Springfield Broadcasting Company's NBC affiliate, KGBX, while sole ownership of KWTO was assigned to Ozarks Broadcasting Company and Lester Cox and his partners. In preparation for the Springfield television stations coming on the air, Lester E. Cox secured a partnership with Springfield newspaper president Thomas Warren Duval to license KYTV-TV as the local NBC affiliate.
And these were some of the first television stations in the state of Missouri. In fact, when Channel 10 came on the air, there were 3 other TV stations in the state, 2 in Kansas City and 1 in St. Louis. KMOX TV, for example, a major player in the media, had not come on the air yet. KCMO TV in Kansas City had not come on the air yet. So Channel 10 was probably about the 4th station on the air.
While KTTS-TV was the first local station on the air, KYTV was the first to receive a television broadcast license. At the time, there were 4 channel designations available locally, 3, 10, 21, and 27. KYTV was assigned Channel 3. KTTS-TV Channel 10 was able to begin broadcasting sooner from KTTS Radio's downtown location at the southwest corner of Walnut Street and Jefferson Avenue, a building that had been the city's Springfield Club and Chamber of Commerce offices.
The newsroom was in the basement, right next door to an accordion school. The offices were on the main floor, and the studio was on the 2nd floor in what had been a ballroom. And they converted the ballroom into a TV studio, which was small.
Since they'd been running the radio station from that location, they were just running the television station from that location and put a very small little tower on top of that building.
We were in the Chamber of Commerce building at Walnut and Jefferson that they reinforced with an awful lot of interior girders because they were going to put a tower on top, and finally did. But boy, the place was a mess, because after you get a building that old and then put girders up through it to support a tower, why, it takes a fair amount of engineering, second, I guess, to the Panama Canal.
Of course, when we came on the air, it was strictly black and white. And I do recall Pearson telling me that in the beginning, financial institutions were not particularly interested in lending to this new thing called television. In fact, he said some of them kind of viewed it as financing a circus. Now that seems incredible to us today, but it was a new thing. They didn't know whether it was going to go or not. In the beginning, we had 1 camera. Your only sources of programming were live, on camera, and film. It took a little while, of course, to gain the network affiliation, which became CBS TV, because they had to make sure indeed that we were going to be on the air.
The delay of Channel 3 coming on the air was the result of owners breaking ground for a new state-of-the-art facility on West Sunshine Street on land that's been the longtime home of the station.
That facility, they said, was one of the state-of-the-art facilities for that time, you know. and it was. We had a huge studio and had a big glass window in the lobby and a big glass window out of the control room where the people that operated the programs could see through the window in the studio, and then guests could come in the lobby and watch. Our original general manager was Gordon Wardell, and we had Homer Tyndall, was a local guy that was sales manager, and then Dennis White, he was a KGBX radio guy. He's the guy that built the place and put it all together, and he was a very, very meticulous individual about his work, and his work always, it always showed.
Television was an entirely new industry with little precedents or ways of doing things. In many ways, broadcasters were limited only by their imagination, creativity, and resources. With facilities and personnel in place, local station owners immediately began focusing on programming with a little guidance and oversight from the federal government.
I'm sure you've heard this said, and it was true. In the beginning, people would literally spend time watching the test pattern. Now, for the first few days, we'd come on in the afternoon, as I recall, about 4 or 5 o'clock, and that test pattern would be on the air for just a couple of hours. In the first few days, that's all it was.
The government was interested in getting the business in this country, the television business. And so they decided one of the things that would be necessary was local news.
Well, we were always particularly proud of our news coverage. We won a number of news awards.
Radio veteran David Estes anchored KYTV's very first newscast.
I had done no television. I was the only news person that as I recall. Don Payton was the sports announcer. Carl Fox was the weatherman. So we depended on Fred. He was the studio director. And I said, Fred, what am I supposed to do here? When I sat down at the desk, he said, when the red light comes on, start talking. When it goes off, shut up. So first thing I recall saying, good evening, welcome to KYTV News, 6 o'clock news. I'm David Estes. This is the news. And it went on from there. You might find it interesting that I had never seen a camera before.
Newscast remained the focus and foundation of local television production.
Some days we'd do a half hour, some days 15 minutes, because on Fridays we'd segue from a newscast into a little music piece with Chuck Bowers and the Wranglers. But usually we had a half-hour newscast sponsored by Phillips Petroleum. Then we had another one at 10 o'clock called Night Desk. Night Desk was our original newscast. Our opening of that was real unique. I don't know if people can remember when we had the little guy sitting there typing on the typewriter, had his little visor on, had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth like the old journalists used to do. You know, they'd sit there and type. That was their kind of environment, you know. And then we took and the old teletypes, the old AP teletypes, you know, had the sound on it. We went back, we'd run a microphone back there and pick up that sound off that teletype and try to sync it to that typewriter. And it was kind of unique.
I started at KY3 as a news writer with Saul Moser, who was the news director. Part of my job in the evening was to go through the PhotoFax and pick out pictures that were features or of interest but were not really part of the newscast. Mount all those on flipboards and did a thing called, we call it PhotoFax. So the last 5 or 6 minutes of the show was flipping through with and writing a script for each of these pictures to sort of bring the show to a conclusion.
Early newscasters were men, an era holdover from radio and newspaper. In time, women also began reporting and anchoring the news. In 1976, KYTV hired Joyce Reed, who became Springfield's first female reporter and anchor. Weather segments were always a popular and important part of early newscast. Early visuals were simple, ones that could be easily and quickly updated. In time, weather presentations and backgrounds became more detailed with the use of magnetic boards and symbols.
And it had Scotch light. You remember what that Scotch light is? Reflective tape, where if you cut it one way, it'll reflect this way, and then you take it and reverse it and go the other way, and just stack it on there. And how that works when they got the movement out of it, we took a polarized lens, like a pair of polarized sunglasses, you know, when you can turn them, how they'll go light, dark, and we had a lens mounted in a circular device, and it had a little electric motor on it, and we'd set that in front of the camera.
Sports coverage was another early and popular segment of local broadcasts, with equally unique and in some instances primitive graphics.
No, it wasn't kind of primitive. It was primitive, but it was also a lot of fun. We used to present our baseball scores. Now keep in mind, the whole concept of television was so much different back then from what it is now. But we would present our baseball scores on cardboard flip cards, which were colored, painted by Andy Miller, who was the chief artist at Silver Dollar City.
Commercials or on-air advertisements were important parts of news program formats and broadcast schedules.
Locally, you know, everything was live. There wasn't any tape projects or taped commercials or anything of that nature. We had to do like newscasts. We'd sit down and go through our daily logs, figure out what we had to do, and then we had a log from the traffic department, and we'd go around the studio and set up live television displays for commercial presentation, because it depends on who was going to do it. If it was late in the newscast, it sure is not going to be the sports guy. If it was early in the newscast, it might be the sports guy, or it might be the weather guy. That's why we'd have to have talk-throughs before every newscast, so the on-the-air talent would know what they were supposed to be doing when they weren't doing their actual job, like news or weather or sports. They were getting ready to present a commercial. It was just kind of, you know, here it is. Read the script. If it's 25, it's 25. If it's 35, it's 35. You know, back in those days, you know, we didn't have exact times. We tried to keep them as close to the time that we needed, but sometimes it didn't work.
If you had a commercial, it was either the announcer live on camera, or the person from the organization that was doing the advertising had to be there. For example, if you were an appliance dealer and you had a TV spot at 8:29 p.m., if you were going to do that commercial, then you actually had to be in the station live so they could shoot the commercial. Now, there were many problems associated with that. Usually they wanted to display their merchandise. Let's say it was a refrigerator. Well, they had to bring that refrigerator to the station. And that wasn't an easy job in the beginning, because in the beginning we were located in a big building there at the corner of Walnut and Jefferson. So for them to bring that refrigerator in, it meant that they had to come up 1, 2, 3 flights of stairs. Probably the most unusual thing that we ever had in that capacity was one time we actually brought a horse into the studio. Well, they had to bring that horse in the side door, bring it up those 3 flights of steps and in to the studio. That was probably the most unusual thing that we had there in the beginning.
Local children's programming and hosts remain vivid and unforgettable in many viewers' memories, and children's and educational programming was an important staple of early Springfield television. KYTV's The Children's Hour premiered in 1953, not long after the station originally signed on the air. Alice Lowe and Reen Handley were the original hosts of the daily program. For a time, Claudine Cox, daughter-in-law of station owner Lester E. Cox, also hosted the show. In 1957, Norma Champion took over hosting responsibilities and remains warmly remembered as Aunt Norma to countless Ozarks residents who grew up watching and in some instances being on the Children's Hour.
Well, I had no idea how important the interaction I was having with the children was until they were grown, because the parents weren't paying any attention and the kids didn't know to tell me that. But since Children's Hour has been off the air and these children are grown now, I hear it all the time.
Series regulars puppets Skinny and Rusty, who were performed by Fred Raines, added to the still fond memories people have of the program. Other favorite segments included celebrating birthdays, singing the Wishing Well song, and also studio participants attempting to open the castle that was part of the set.
Keep wishing and soon you'll be all well.
We did have a contest on Children's Hour, which was opening the castle. That was a drawing ahead of time. One child at home, they'd send in their names and we'd draw one from a child at home and then one there. And if they picked the right castle key, they got half of the prizes and the other child got duplicate prizes of the one at home.
The Children's Hour was presented live, daily, Monday through Friday until 1970, when the format changed to being pre-recorded and broadcast on Saturday mornings. The series ran until October 1986.
Of course, television was so new that I don't think anybody knew a great deal about what they're doing, and nobody knew less than I did about it. I had a crew that was absolutely wonderful. They didn't just do something I asked them to do. They took an interest in making Children's Hour succeed.
KTTS-TV also was actively and successfully producing local children's programming. An early effort was Television Classroom, an education partnering program with the public school system that provided the unique ability for students to demonstrate things that they were learning in area schools and classrooms. A regular segment of the program taught viewers conversational Spanish.
Television Classroom started almost immediately when the station came on the air. It was Monday through Friday, and we actually just devoted that hour to the public school system.
Also in these early years, former Children's Hour host Reen Handley was the original host of Channel 10's Romper Room series, with Miss Jo later becoming the program's host. Wayne Grisham entertained and educated children as Captain Briney from 1956 until 1969. His unusual first mate was a naturally popular squirrel monkey named Salty. 1010 the Clown joined Captain Briney and Salty, and the three of them made frequent community appearances such as parades and other civic events. Captain Briney and 1010 would also visit children in local hospitals. Another popular segment with children was a Saturday morning show, The Junior Auction.
These kids brought bundles of Kitty Clover potato chip bags. That's what they used for money. They could bid 5 bags or 10 bags or maybe 250 for a bicycle, something like that. And you wouldn't believe the noise level.
In addition to local newscasts, commercials, and children's and educational shows, a remarkable and varied mix of locally originating programming was produced by both Channel 3 and Channel 10 in their studios during the early years. These shows included Sunday afternoon Springfield Symphony concerts, teen dance programs, professional wrestling with rings constructed in studio, and popular noontime programs. For a number of years, Channel 10's College of Cooking featured home economist Mary Elizabeth Cox presenting live cooking demonstrations and information from her own complete and functional studio kitchen. Channel 3 presented Midday, patterned after NBC's Today Show, a mix of news, interviews, weather, and entertainment segments, and later changing the format and program to become High Noon. Channel 10's FYI program was a live afternoon favorite with audiences. In time, equipment, technology, and innovation enabled TV crews to produce and record programs on location. The result was a heightened realism, more direct contact with viewers, and setting the stage for growing news gathering and special broadcast abilities. KYTV acquired the first remote unit in the area in August of 1954, and within a week was producing features from the city's fairgrounds, a site that was also popular for KTTS TV segments. Many viewers will readily recall these iconic and in many ways groundbreaking location programs. Many of these not only audience favorites at the time, but they remain popular memories. Leading these were often features and segments that drew and interacted with local crowds, such as KYTV's The Secret Visitor that originated from downtown on the square in front of Hearst Department Store and hosted by Chuck Hessington. The program later evolved into Man with a Mic that followed midday and was hosted by Fran Eulis from in front of Springfield's Tower Theater. Each episode ended with the popular and memorable contest segment, The Secret Silhouette. By March of 1959, Channel 3 had purchased a videotape machine, one of the first in the country, opening up a new era in television production and broadcasting. KYTV immediately put this new technology and capability to work, building a special truck that would enable remote productions. One of these early productions was the dedication of Table Rock Dam, followed during the same year with a taped and national award-winning adaptation of Harold Bell Wright's classic Ozark story, The Shepherd of the Hills.
Mark Trimble had Shepherd of the Hills back in those days. We went down there and did that play and put it on tape. And you know, it was crazy because back then you couldn't do an electronic edit with videotape. We had to cut tape with razor blades. That was quite a deal. I think that was one of the first times that anything like that had ever been tried.
Still another technology advancement occurred in 1966 when KYTV bought Studio Color cameras, the first in Springfield. Color television and the ability to produce location shows also strongly impacted sports programming. Popular shows like KYTV's Championship Fishing with Virgil Ward and Sunday Speedway were audience favorites.
We got that started through doing the Ozarks Outdoors with the Conservation Department. And we ended up with 125 market a week syndication out of that. And that lasted for a long time because the ratings had the very first program in that type.
I believe it was 1977 was the first year. We sent the cameras out, and our crew loved it because it got them out of the TV station and they could set up the cameras at the Fairgrounds Speedway, and they did. I think we used 4 or 5 of them, and taped the races. We taped them all, and we taped all classes. We would tape them, come in Saturday morning, edit the show, I'd narrate it, and then show it on Sunday. It was called Sunday Speedway.
Springfield, Missouri made broadcast history with the locally originated live weekly series, The Ozark Jubilee, crewed by KYTV personnel and broadcast nationally over the ABC network beginning in 1955. A unique accomplishment in that other network programming originated only from New York or Los Angeles at the time. Equally significant, the program was the first country music series broadcast on national television. The groundbreaking program was created by local Crossroads Productions partners Cy Simon, Ralph Foster, Lester Cox, and John Mahaffey, and hosted by Grand Ole Opry star and legendary singer Red Foley. Showcasing an extraordinary lineup of both established and up-and-coming recording artists, the Ozark Jubilee was in ways a variety show with a mix of country music, regular comedy routines, featured square dance groups, and local entertainers such as the Tall Timber Trio and sometimes novelty acts. The whole tone of the program, while unquestionably professional and talent-filled, was relaxed and laid back, much of this due to host Red Foley's easygoing charm. The series originated from Springfield's downtown Jewel Theater, and preparation and performance of the weekly live show was a unique and memorable experience.
We'd go down there on Saturday morning and rehearse all day long, you know, and there was no videotape, nothing pre-recorded, and have to rehearse each one of those pieces of that music, commercials, and the whole bit. And then when we got all that done, we'd back up and try to go through the whole hour without stopping. And took a while.
So there would be opportunities for downtime. Downtime was great. As a young budding wannabe guitar player, I got to sit backstage and watch Chet Atkins practice for an hour, which, I mean, that's an opportunity that you just can't ever explain to anybody. I stood backstage with a script and a pen in my hand for 15 minutes talking with Patsy Cline and never thought to ask her to sign the script.
But by 8 o'clock at night, we were ready, and it was fast-paced.
Audience members would come to the Ozarks and Springfield from across the country to see the Jubilee, many proudly holding up signs of where they were from.
There were so many people, particularly in the summer, that would come to Springfield to see the Jubilee done, and I think they charged you $1 to get in or something like that. But the line would go out of the Jewel Theater and up to St. Louis Street and back around the corner. People from absolutely all over the United States. It was very, very popular.
Throughout its run, the Ozark Jubilee underwent 2 additional name changes, Country Music Jubilee and Jubilee USA. The final broadcast of the series was September 24, 1960. As imagined, presenting a live weekly national television program had been a memorable and remarkable experience for show creators, cast members, and crew.
After the final show was done, they brought out certificates signed by Ralph Foster and John Mahaffey and Cy Simon and presented them to each one of the cast members. And I still have mine, and I sort of consider that my diploma. The things that I learned watching a network television program being produced week after week after week sort of educated me in the world of television.
Following the end of the Jubilee series, a new national music series originated from Springfield, Missouri, the 5-Star Jubilee. Created by the same producers as the Ozark Jubilee, the 5 featured stars included Rex Allen, Tex Ritter, Carl Smith, Jimmy Wakely, and Snooky Lanson. Each would individually host the program on a rotating basis. The program premiered on NBC in March 1961 and originated from the Landers Theater. The broadcast was produced as a summer replacement program and ran until September 1961. Beginning with the May 12th episode, the 5-Star Jubilee made national broadcast history as the first network color series to originate outside of New York or Los Angeles. In an interesting arc, original Ozark Jubilee host Red Foley returned to host the final 5-Star Jubilee episode, which was recorded in black and white due to earlier technical problems.
So the final show came up, and everybody was happy, and they thanked everybody for being there, and we knew the show was over because it was a summer replacement, and NBC packed up their cameras and their mobile unit and took off because they had to do the World Series. Well, somebody had hit the wrong button in Chicago at the videotape machine, and when they played the tape back, it didn't record. So the final show of the 5-Star Jubilee had to be redone.
With the broadcast of the Ozark Jubilee and 5-Star Jubilee, country music programs had established themselves as popular with Ozark's viewers. The Slim Wilson Show continued this tradition, premiering in 1964 and running weekly for 11 years on KYTV. Slim and other members of the cast had been regulars on the earlier Jubilee programs. The series was produced in the KYTV studios and also featured the unique and high-energy dance styles of L.D. Keller and the Promenaders, local square dancers from Missouri State University, who had also been Ozark Jubilee regulars and performers on the local KTTS program, Foothills Frolics. The creation and ability to broadcast programming was in itself an accomplishment. Making it available to ever broader audiences was the next step. In 1961, Channel 3 constructed a new tower, Big John, at Fordland, Missouri, one of the highest elevations in the Ozarks. At over 1,600 feet, it was one of the tallest in the world at the time. An even taller tower, 2,000 feet, was constructed in 1970. Channel 10 soon followed with their own new tower at Fordland and significantly increased broadcast potential.
Well, we tried to pick, of course, the right spot to put it, and we put up that new tower in October of 1973. After erected, it virtually doubled our viewing area. It was a new 2,000-foot tower, which at the time, and I'm sure probably still today, was one of the tallest towers in the nation.
Many favorite television personalities from popular CBS programs would often visit Springfield as part of special events and promotions, including former resident and well-known personality Bob Barker.
Well, we would often do it, of course, through the network, but when we celebrated the going on the air of our new 2,000-foot tower, we had a week-long promotion at the Battlefield Mall, and each day we would bring in a star, so to speak. We had Bob Barker. Bob Barker actually started his career at KTTS Radio. And we had Lassie, the dog. And guess who drew the biggest audience that week of anybody? Lassie. Lassie was the biggest attraction of that week.
For Channel 10, there had also been changes in address as the station relocated from downtown to a new facility on East Division Street, a move that in time would also reflect a change in station call letters in 1972 when owners sold KTTS Radio. Along with the robust variety of locally produced programming, Channel 10 and 3 were also able to include national programming from the ABC network along with their own CBS and NBC schedules.
We had the good fortune of being able to cherry pick some of ABC programs since they didn't have an affiliate there. And the same thing was true of KYTV. So if they had a show that we were interested in carrying, and they were interested in us carrying it, well then we simply got permission from ABC to carry it.
Local affiliates were first and foremost committed to their own network schedules. While ABC programming was available locally, not all programs were picked up by Channel 10 or 3, and ones that might be seen another day or time than their regular national broadcast.
Each one of them picked up some programming. ABC was developing in those days. It was not a full-time network in the 60s. And so they had some good programming that was coming along, like the FBI and a few like that they picked up. And I think most of them basically ran them either on weekends or after the 10 News was over.
All this changed in 1968 when station owner Ken Meyer and Midland Television Corporation partners brought KMTC TV and ABC to Springfield.
It kind of just happened. We had started KTXR, so it got us interested in broadcasting. About 65, 66, we heard that it was a group that was going to file for the one existing channel available on television. At that time, it was Channel 21 that was available. And in the process, they changed us to 27.
The UHF channel assignment was newer and evolving technology for broadcasters with its own unique differences.
Well, I was worried. In those days, UHF tubes, which were all made overseas, were not the most dependable. And we had, while we were testing on that, we'd had a lot of trouble keeping them on the air and that. So the thing I worried about back there is it going to stay on the air after all of this furor?
It was also a technology that was not widely familiar to viewers.
We did a lot of radio advertising at that point of time also, get the new and the best. We used, UHF, has a cleaner signal than VHF. Of course, engineers like to debate that.
Promotion and education were the keys to introducing the new channel to the community.
We had at least 2 people that did nothing but answer the telephone for a couple of months, telling the callers what UHF really meant, what it was, where they could get it.
KMTC Channel 27 officially signed on the air September 22nd, 1968.
It's kind of one of those things like, I don't know what a good comparison is, but you couldn't believe that you'd really pulled it off.
Broadcast facilities and offices were located on East Cherry Street in a building that included KTXR FM radio that was managed by Ken Meyer's wife, Jane. In addition to the strength of ABC's developing news, entertainment, and widely recognized sports broadcast, KMTC's local programming, like other stations in town, was a popular part of its daily schedules. An early local highlight was I'll Never Tell, a weekly music show hosted by Roman Catholic priest Harry Schlitt. The program featured local bands that would perform and talk with Father Harry. Local teens would vote on the bands, and the program was always popular and well attended.
There were a lot of fun experiences in that.
In 1972, KMTC launched a unique programming strategy, First at 5, programming their early evening newscast ahead of the traditional 6 p.m. newscast.
We started the news at 5 o'clock. So that was the first 5 o'clock news in town.
Later, notable local programming included The Denny Duran Show, a program produced in partnership with Evangel University and premiering in 1977, the year that the football Evangel Crusaders took to the field for the first time, and featuring head coach and former professional quarterback Denny Duran and game highlights. 1969 is remembered by many people as the year we landed on the moon. Americans watched their televisions with interest and pride as astronaut Neil Armstrong stepped out and onto the lunar surface, representing all mankind and a shared hope and mission of peace. Televised images from the moon have become an enduring and inspiring aspect of both national and broadcast history.
I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
Broadcast history was also made in 1969 with the founding of PBS, the Public Broadcasting Service, a nonprofit organization of 350 member stations across the country that is promoted as America's largest classroom, the nation's largest stage for the arts, and a trusted window to the world. Differing operationally and philosophically from commercial network organizations, PBS was the result of the Public Broadcasting Act signed into law in 1967 by President Lyndon Johnson, who stated, "While we work every day to produce new goods and to create new wealth,
we want most of all to enrich man's spirit, and that is the purpose of this act."
UHF public broadcasting station KOZK went on the air January 21, 1975. As a PBS station, KOZK was not-for-profit and a community license, different from Springfield's commercial television stations. Nationally, in cities without a PBS station, public broadcasting programming could be occasionally viewed on other local stations, much like ABC programming was initially available in Springfield. Prior to KOZK's presence in the community, KYTV aired the popular children's program Sesame Street at 9 a.m. during the week. The enriching children's content and educational possibilities, as well as cultural, music, and historic programs provided by PBS, were a strong appeal to many community members who became enthusiastic and supportive to bringing public television to Springfield.
A lot of it was centered on Sesame Street. Such a great training tool. But there was interest in a lot of quarters in Springfield.
In 1972, a strong, influential, and active group of women, today's Junior League of Springfield, began actively encouraging and working towards bringing public television programming to the community.
Before the Junior League, there was a Community Service League, its predecessor, and that's where the interest started in that organization. And my wife, Faye, was a president of the Community Service League, and so I naturally was hearing a lot about their interests, and one of them was public television.
At this time, interest and awareness of public television programming was the result of experiences that community members had while living away from Springfield or while traveling.
It was a lucky convergence. My husband was doing his medical residency in Madison, Wisconsin, and so we lived there for several years, and we had 2 children then. We knew we were missing something great here. I did, because being in Madison, I saw what public television could do for a community.
Bringing public television to Springfield became an organized and focused priority for the All-Female Community Service League. League member Roseanne Bentley was asked to help lead the project.
And they asked me, the president asked me if I would be the project finding person. And I, in my head, said, "Ooh, I've got a good project."
They had the push, they had the drive, they had the woman power for these jobs, and they had a lot of connections, and it really worked well.
You probably won't believe this, but I was so young and naive. I wrote a letter that was like 2 sentences to the public broadcasting system in Washington, D.C., and said, "How do you get a public television station on the air?" And I'm sure that they laughed when they saw that letter. But they did respond. They laid out some steps that you had to do, and we did them. And the chamber joined us with Larry Ollis being president, and that was a great boost too.
Well, I was interested in, and I think a lot of people were interested in anything that enriched the community.
A remarkable group of Springfield business and education leaders ensured a strong start and future for the fledgling station.
I don't think we asked anybody who refused us, so that was great. It was a very strong board. We were all so excited about it.
We had a lot of good people on that board. Let me just say this, when you had this kind of board, it made it a lot easier to borrow money. And we had solicited, naturally, all the banks for money. To start money, it cost a heck of a lot of money just to get this thing even on the air. And nobody had seen it. It was just an unknown quantity to a lot of people.
A not-for-profit organization, Springfield Community Television was incorporated on June 1, 1973. Larry Ollis was elected president of the board, serving multiple terms. Many individuals and organizations stepped bravely forward, providing significant support. Among these was local resident and nationally known developer John Q. Hammonds, who provided a generous Capital Founders gift, enabling KOZK to be eligible for an Educational Broadcast Facilities grant from the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. Drury University provided space for KOZK in a former Naval Reserve building named the John Q. Hammonds Broadcast Center in gratitude for Mr. Hammonds' leading gift. KOZK would later relocate broadcast facilities to the new state-of-the-art Shoemaker Communications Center on Drury's campus in 1990. The Community Service League, today's Junior League of Springfield, Commerce Bank, Smith-Glenn Callaway Clinic Foundation, and J.H.G. Cooper family provided additional founding gifts that permitted the purchase of original transmission equipment for KOZK. Southwest Missouri Congressman Gene Taylor and legislative colleagues also provided support.
Most of our money came from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. We went back to Washington and we got our representative and senator and everybody else involved in trying to get the doors open, and they did, and it worked.
Area educators also provided early and sustained endorsement and funding assistance.
The public school system was interested and, of course, immediately signed on, as did other schools around the area. And the schools paid a service per student, and so some of the smaller outlying schools, of course, paid just per head that were participating in this, as did the Springfield Public School. So it was a source of funding for the station to do that, and it fitted into the curriculum of the schools.
In early 1974, less than a year before sign-on, local broadcaster Bill Maynard was hired as executive director, responsible for the day-to-day operation and administration of the station.
We were looking for someone that, because we were all volunteers, you know, we all had jobs to go to every day and couldn't spend our days at the station like we had to have, and so we needed a general manager, and Bill came in.
Station staff was small, originally only 7 employees who were assisted by a large number of student and community volunteers. Together with community members who had worked tirelessly to bring public television to the Ozarks, they celebrated the sign-on broadcast of KOZK.
Well, not being a knowledgeable person about broadcasting, I was just kind of amazed that it was actually going out over the air.
I think I was at the station most of the afternoon and waiting and just watching, trying not to get in the way. And those of us who'd worked for several years to get it to go on, I mean, we just almost cried.
Local programming, public affairs shows, informational series, and historical documentary features were an immediate focus of the station and contributions to the region.
Well, I think they loved what they were seeing happening. And so people would say, what can I do? You know, and some would donate money, and some would come over to the station and work and help.
Volunteerism, the origin and success of KOZK coming to the Ozarks, continued being a strength in the upcoming years as the passion, enthusiasm, and dedication of area-wide viewers generously volunteered their time and talents to support important and familiar fundraisers like pledge or membership drives and the ever-popular tele-auction.
You know, one of the best things was that everybody was watching the tele-auction night after night and wanting to be on it, wanting to be one of the people who stood by the table where the auction was happening. I just thought it just created so much excitement and interest that it really, you know, bolstered the station tremendously.
I'll tell you what, there were a number of the auctioneers like Joe that had followed. Oh, Alice, my gosh, there was a worker for you. She participated in everything she could. It was done a lot for love, a lot of love of being able to communicate, being able to share with people the ideals that public broadcasting brought to its audiences everywhere. And we brought it to Springfield, Missouri, and to all the people of the Ozarks. It was a responsibility, but we were proud of it, proud to be participants of it.
Celebrating broadcasters and the contributions these people make to their communities is the Missouri Broadcasters Association, founded in 1948.
These people that put these things on the air and touch people's lives over the air, they're the ones that are really the ones that have done a lot.
In 2011, a Hall of Fame was established to honor the special contributions of individual members. Springfield television personality Norma Champion and station owner Ken Meyer were inducted into this prestigious group in 2014 and 2016, respectively. Norma Champion being the first female inductee.
I know both of them. I got the chance to sit with Norma at her home and see the puppets that are so famous, and that was special. Got to go speak at one of her broadcast classes one time, and that was special. But what's really special about her is the impact she still has on people in the Ozarks who grew up with her. Ken is a dear friend of mine. You know, he kind of grew this thing and started it and built it from scratch on his own. He would tell you that the real heart of that, you know, station and everything was his wife, Janie. You see their names on many things through their philanthropy.
As singer-songwriter Bob Dylan memorably observed, the times, they are a-changin'. Springfield's commercial television stations are no longer locally owned. KYTV was sold for the first time in 1978. Following was the sale of KMTC, along with the change in call letters to KDEB in 1985. In a unique bookend fashion, KOLR, formerly KTTS-TV and the first local station on the air, was the last locally owned commercial station, being sold in 1998.
And so we ended up, we were the last locally owned station.
Non-commercial public television station KOZK remains a local organization. The originally chartered community license being transferred to Missouri State University in 2001 and co-aligned with University NPR station KSMU. The origin, accomplishments, and legacy of Springfield, Missouri television stations remain remarkable. It was an era of broadcast pioneers and of pioneering, an era that was unquestionably unique and fondly remembered.
Well, it was quite an experience, really, as I look back on it, to think about the beginning and the advancements that have been made. And of course, today, many of those people that I've mentioned, many of the people that I worked with and do are no longer with us, but I certainly have great memories of them.
What will the future of television and local broadcast stations be? Stay tuned.